Shallow subwoofers have certainly been a mainstay in car audio, but the team at WaveTech has totally revolutionized the design and concept about the thin subwoofer. Joining us now is Jason Kemmerer of WaveTech, their Chief Technical Officer, to tell us a little bit more. Now, Jay, we got a glimpse of this subwoofer back at K-Fest in Vegas, but I got to tell you, what I seen absolutely blew my mind. Tell us right now, what is this amazing new, invention that you have in a thin subwoofer?
Yeah, Ben, we're super excited about this new subwoofer. It's actually been a long time coming. I came up with this concept over 2.5 years ago, and like anything else that we do, it's something that fits a specific need in the market where there wasn't an existing product solution or there just wasn't a good one. And in the case of thin subwoofers, they've all had some form of compromise. You would never have purchased one of those other thin subwoofers and used it in a regular subwoofer application that didn't need to be thin. But we've broken that paradigm now. We've established a new one, which is ultimate high performance, also in a thin package. So it's a subwoofer that can work for any situation, not just ones that require a thin subwoofer to perform. Now, a few things that make it really unique. One is we've gone completely the opposite direction of what most traditional thin subs have done, where they tend to have to have a smaller motor and the spiders on the outside. We've completely inverted that. The spiders are actually on the inside of the motor structure. So instead of having to compromise on motor power, the only limit to the size of the motor we can have is it fits into the frame. So we can have a really massive motor structure on there, and along with a huge 5-inch voice coil that gives us really incredible power handling, but also gives us the clearance inside for a really stable structure that allows over 2 inches of peak-to-peak excursion, with 20 millimeters of linear X-Max. So you can compare that to any high-performance sub on the market, and it outperforms the vast majority of them at any price. But it's only 3 inches deep. So think about that, only 3 inches deep, but has over 2 inches of peak-to-peak excursion. That's pretty incredible. And so that's why it's a patent pending design. There's a lot that went into it. Initially, I didn't know if it was even going to work when I came up with this concept, and it took a long time. It took a lot of iterations, a lot of finite element analysis, simulations, prototyping. I've done a lot of subwoofers in my career, and this one was definitely one of the most difficult, but also the most incredible. I put it right up there with some of the best that I've ever done, and I've done a lot of really great subs. So this is something that we're really, really proud of, and we think it's going to be a shift in the market, because there really hasn't been a thin subwoofer with high performance like this that can also go in a really, really small box. A lot of the thin subs need a relatively large box, or they have a fairly high Q, so they can only perform in sealed. Well, ours can go in a super small box, actually as low as 0.4 cubic feet sealed, because of the really low Q and the strong motor and the relatively heavy moving mass. But also they can work very well in small ported, which is pretty unique. So you have the huge advantage of a very thin subwoofer, on top of the whole point of it is to have a very small enclosure as well without compromising on performance. And the efficiency is really high. So you really, 500 watts is a great amount of power on it. But the power handling is actually a conservative 750 watts RMS, with a peak over 2250. But that's, like I said, that's conservative. So you can throw a lot of power at it. It'll take it, but it's actually really efficient. We've had demo systems working with as little as 300 watts on them, 250 watts actually. And the show car that we had at Knowledge Fest actually had a 500 on it, and people couldn't believe the amount of output, not just the amount of output, but the sound quality, the low bass performance, the impact that it has in such a small enclosure. That was a 0.6 cubic foot box that was in our demo car.
Jay, it's nothing short of impressive, the innovation that has gone onto the subwoofer. When you see it, it looks completely different from anything else that you've seen. I love that you've pointed out a couple of the challenges or obstacles that some of the other shallow subwoofers have not quite met yet. But with this new ingenious design, I think it's going to really make people think about this differently. Now, this wouldn't be complete if we didn't have a little bit of show and tell. So, Jay, why don't you take one out and kind of point out to us some of these key features that you were speaking to?
All right, Ben. Well, let's see if we can see this. This is rather heavy. It weighs about 20 pounds. And the reason here, let me try to support this. The reason it's so heavy is because this entire area here is the motor structure all the way out to the edge of the frame. And the voice coil is a huge 5-inch voice coil in the motor here. And you can see what I was talking about, which just makes this totally different than any other loudspeaker design before, is that the spiders, there's actually 2 spiders in here, mirrored spiders, that connect to a force transfer assembly on the inside, which is maybe a little difficult to see, but there's a cone support, a force transfer assembly that's reinforced that connects that voice coil to the whole cone structure through this center point. And that's what I was saying about, you know, some of the previous shallow designs is they achieved the shallowness by having a smaller motor and just a ribbon of a spider along the outside. But those are inherently, well, there's 2 things. One, they're not as stable because the spider is so close in line with where the surround is, so they have a tendency to rock. But also, you know, you have a certain maximum size motor that you can have. Well, the motor here is obviously really big, but also the spiders are in the very center on the axis of the whole moving assembly, so it's inherently more stable than any other design that's been done before. And that's one of the reasons why we're able to get such a huge mechanical stroke out of it, as well as the linear X max and the power handling because of the really, really large voice coil and some ventilation that's going on inside as well.
That is a crazy design, Jay, especially with those dual spiders on the inside, making that voice coil so huge. Of course, I'm going to ask you, I hope you have a little bit more muscle. Let's take a look at the front as well as the, obviously the cone, the surround, and all that goodness.
So from the front view of the thinPRO12, you can notice a few things that are really different as well. The cone itself is actually a composite honeycomb Nomex and glass fiber structure where that's really, really lightweight, but also super rigid. So it can withstand that massive amount of pressure in those small boxes with that huge excursion that it has. On top of that, it's actually a standard 12-inch cutout, which is fairly unique in the shallow subwoofer arena. So it's a 11 1/8 standard 12-inch cutout. So this can go in prefab boxes or in any standard 12-inch application that you have. But in order to maximize the cone area, so we're getting the most air, we're moving the most air possible with a larger cone area. We're using a unique custom double roll surround that takes up a lot less space than those huge half rolls do, but it's also much more linear and it's also much more stable. So it gives us that control over that really long excursion range without taking up a lot of space. So more SPL and better sound quality. So another cool feature is the trim ring. So the trim ring actually hides all the screws, which gives it a really clean look. But you can also reverse mount the subwoofer, unlike most other subs out there, even traditional subs. It has a dual function gasket, so standard mount or reverse mount if you want to show off, you know, the really cool looking massive motor structure on the back. It can seal against the front in a reverse mount.
So if you're just tuning in, WaveTech has announced a brand new revolutionary 12-inch thin subwoofer called the thinPRO12. Jason, all that's left to understand, what are we looking at as far as retail map pricing, and when is this available?
So there's 2 models. There's a 4 ohm and a 2 ohm of the thinPRO12, and both of those are $699 retail, and they're in production now. So they'll be shipping in-house. They'll be in-house and shipping in September. And you can go to our website and find out more. That's wavetech-usa.com. And we've got a lot of information up there. The owner's manual's up, so you can check out the specs and start thinking about the boxes you want to make for these really, really unique subs.